Song Talk Radio.
Welcome to Song Talk Radio. This is the show with songwriters talking to other songwriters about the craft of songwriting. We share tips, tools, and techniques, and together we all become better at writing songs. I'm your host, Neil Modi, and with me, my co-host, Phil Emery. How are you doing, Phil?
I'm a presently accounted for, and accountingly present and all that stuff. I'm here.
Good. Make sure you check with your accountant on that.
Yeah, I will.
And we're delighted. We're delighted tonight to have the return of singer-songwriter and music educator Susan Cattaneo for a very special episode tonight. And a little bit about Susan. With her powerful voice, captivating melodies, and finely crafted lyrics, Susan Cattaneo is one of Boston's most respected singer-songwriters and educators. In her 20-plus years teaching songwriting at Berklee, Susan has helped students work on over 15,000 songs in all musical genres and styles and mentored over 2,000 artists. Susan won the CT Folk Festival and is nominated for Singer-Songwriter of the Year at this year's Boston Music Awards. She has been a finalist or winner in the country's most prestigious songwriting and music contests, and in-demand collaborator for a wide range of local and national artists. She is a 3-time Kerrville New Folk finalist. Her double album, The Hammer and the Heart, charted on #1 on the Billboard Heatseekers chart and yielded a folk radio #1 single and top 10 album. Her latest work, All Is Quiet, has been featured as a top 10 folk radio album since its release in April, and I can vouch for that. Is a fantastic album. And welcome back to Song Talk Radio, Susan.
Wow, that's a really long bio. Sorry about that. I was like, oh, it keeps going. Okay.
That's okay. We're going to be here for the next 40 minutes. We can spend a minute on your bio.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful to have you back on the show, Susan. And tonight we're going to be diving into tips for overcoming songwriter's block or writer's block for songwriters. Before we get to the meat of that, we just want to talk once again about our plans for our next songwriting challenge with our listeners and with ourselves. If you've been following the podcast for a while, you know that we've done a songwriting challenge for the last 3 years now, right, Phil?
Yes.
And so our songwriting challenge for 2023, which is closer than you think, folks. And we've decided to do a challenge on the idea of writing a song in a mode that you don't normally write in, or an unusual mode. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about modes in some future episodes and stuff. And I was saying to Phil last week that I swear my phone and my computer and everything was listening to me talk about modes, because as soon as we did the podcast last week, first thing the next morning, a YouTube video popped up on my feed talking about modes ranked as the modes ranked by brightness. And this is by one of my favorite YouTubers, David Bennett Piano, who's a fantastic YouTuber. He talks a lot about theory, analyzing Beatles songs, doing all sorts of interesting topics. And this is the first time for myself that had someone, this time on YouTube, explaining what modes are and what they mean and how it works. And finally, I feel like I got it. Because they've always I've always understood what they are, but not really how I could use them as a songwriter. And watching his video, it's only like 15 minutes long. I finally feel like I actually get it, and how like he goes from darker modes to brighter modes and puts it in that kind of context. And major and minor are actually in the middle there somewhere, and you can play with these different things to try and get a brighter tone or a darker tone, which is really a great way to look at it. How about for yourself, Susan? Do you ever deliberately write in a mode? And I know we all do it by accident sometimes.
Well, so when I was at Berklee, I obviously wrote in modes for assignments. So it'd be like,
Okay.
write in Phrygian, write in Lydian, and write in Aeolian or whatever. Dorian, for example, is a pretty common minor mode. And so you kind of force yourself to, it's about, for me, it's about hearing, if you're hearing do in a different place, right? Because, successful way to write in modes would be to sing the modal scale, write the chords that are present in that mode, and then really try and write around. it. I mean, for me, like I've written some Celtic stuff that just felt right in Dorian. And I've written a lot of country songs that are in mixo. I use mixo a lot actually in my writing, but I have to say I don't necessarily set out intentionally to be like, I'm going to write a song in a mode. I love the fact that the guy that you were talking about talks about light and shadow, because I think that is a more appropriate way to think about modes. It's more about feel. It's like it can really convey a feel. And so I use modal writing. I'll like write a pre-chorus in a mode because I want to set up either a light or a darkness leading into my chorus.
Right.
Or I'll write a modal bridge. And so, and that's because it's also like a departure from where we are normally, and it's kind of taking it to a different place. So that's where I use modes in my songwriting. But I don't normally set out, be like, today it's Locrian, baby. You know, like I
don't. So when you're writing, let's say a bridge, and you're wanting to make use of a mode, do you think, do you sort of target a mode to use? Depending on what kind of song you're using, or is it just kind of whatever feels right?
Well, no. So yeah, I do target the.
Yeah, like I want my bridge to be brighter, or I want my bridge to be darker.
Exactly.
Where do you go then?
Exactly. So yeah, so it's more about like thinking do I want it brighter? You know, if I'm in a major key, and then I'll go to Dorian because it's next to it, but it feels darker. And then, you know, it's also really interesting to think about substitution chords, modal chords, as devices that you can use instead of the standard 1-4-5 transitions, right? So, you know, if you go to, instead of a 5-1 cadence, you go to like a flat 7-1, which is borrowing from Lydian, you know, you can have this same resolution kind of feel, but for some reason it seems brighter. I don't know why. Like that flat 7 is really useful to me. I use that a lot in my songs.
Yeah, and then and Lydian, I think, is very prevalent in pop, rock, country, whatever.
Well, and the cool thing, I'm so glad you guys are doing this, because not a lot of people write in modes, or even, and the Beatles wrote in they used modal writing a lot in separate sections, kind of like I do. And, you know, there isn't a lot of that in popular music now. So now is the time for people to introduce topics like modes into their writing, because it'll set them apart. It'll make them different from what is already out there.
When you mentioned something called modal chords. Can you explain that? Because I'm sure people are going, "What's a modal chord?"
Modal interchange.
Modal interchange. What I meant, or what that means, is using chords that are not diatonic to the key, right? So if you have chords that are built in a major key, you have 1, 2 minor, 3 minor, 4 major, 5 major, 6 minor, 7 diminished, and then back to 1 again, right? So the cool thing about all of that is that any of those minor chords can be used major. Any of those, yeah. So you can go from the standard, 1, 4, 5, 1, right? 1, 4 major, 5 major, 1. Pretty standard. What if you go 1, 4 minor, 5 minor, 1? How does that feel? Those chords are not in the major key, but you are borrowing them from other modes. You're borrowing them from either the minor key scale or from, Dorian, which is, where you have the 5 minor. So that's what I kind of like to pick and choose. And sometimes I'll go 1, 5 major, 1, 5 minor. It's like a nice little ability to, I guess I feel a little less handcuffed to all the chords that are in the diatonic key. This that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I make it too confusing?
No, I think it does, actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things I noticed, so this year or last year, I got a new MIDI keyboard controller, a Native Instruments keyboard controller for my home studio, right? And it has this button called the scale button, and you can do it in the software on your desktop computer as well. And you can pick a major minor scale. You can even pick all these different modes, and they have even, Eastern scales and a whole bunch of different scales. And then you only play the white keys, but tonally it's different depending on which preset you pick. But the interesting thing about that approach, like you're just saying, Susan, is that you don't hear it a lot. You don't hear a lot of borrowing in modern music, because everything, whether it is even just mixed Lydian, it's confined only to mixed Lydian. You're not going to go you're not going to modally interchange one of the chords into the flip major or minor. It's always going to stay within this thing. And I feel like technology is actually playing a role in that, because this thing, the scale button on in every review I look up of this keyboard on YouTube or whatever, they always push this scale feature as such a great handy thing, because you can play in any key and you can play in any mode by just playing the white keys. I'm waiting for some company to release a controller that doesn't have black keys, that just has 7 white keys.
Oh my God, that would be so weird.
That's all you need. No, and I tried playing with it, and it's bizarre for me because I'm hitting these keys, I'm expecting it to sound different, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Or the reverse. Like I'm expecting it to sound like major, and all of a sudden I hit the A and it's actually an A flat. I'm like, that just makes my brain go crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like fun.
I can't use it.
I think the thing that's most important to remember is that people get afraid of modes. I don't know. It's like, it's scary to write in modes. And I think I want to demystify that and say it's, the verb is to play music. It's not to self-loathe or to confuse your way to music. You play music. That's the verb. And, to play with chords, I think it can be really fun, and to experiment, going between major and minor. And, there's you can flat the 2, you can flat 3, flat the 2 chord, flat the 3 chord, and they will work as nice transition pieces to more diatonic chords as well. It's great.
When you say flattening the 2 chords, so if you're in, let's say, the key of G, like a lot of guitarists use G.
Yes.
So the 2 would be a minor.
Yeah.
The A minor chord.
Yeah.
And so when you say the flat 2, is that like a G sharp?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously you wouldn't use it next to the G, right? You'd use it as a transition piece.
5 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, going to the 5.
Yeah.
Right. So it'd be like 1, the flat 2 to 5.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's cool.
You're absolutely right, though, Susan. The point is just to play with it and to play around with it,
right?
Yeah.
And experiment with it. Because I think the other fear that people have is that, it's theory. It's going to destroy my creativity.
Oh my gosh.
Where we know, and we discussed this on the podcast many times, the opposite is actually true. It actually it improves your creativity, gives you more tools to play with. You don't have to use them. Yeah. And you don't have to be, really stringent with any one directive or whatever, but it just opens your mind to different possibilities.
Yeah, definitely. Which is kind of one key to feeling creative and to feeling like you're in the flow when you're writing. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's going to be a fun challenge, I think.
I think so. I think it'll be interesting.
Awesome.
Fascinating. I'm eager to hear what our listeners, what modes our listeners decide to write. Because I think the other thing for me is that, like you're saying, Susan, like sometimes you just sort of stumble on it, you like the tone of something and you work with it, right? But have you ever deliberately written something in Lydian? No, never.
No.
Yeah.
I've done it by accident many times, sure. Yeah. Never on purpose. So we'll see what happens when you try to do it on purpose.
Yeah. When I have a list, I'll send it to you guys, and you can share it with your listeners at some other point. I have a list of contemporary songs that are using modes.
Okay, cool.
That might be really helpful. So
yeah,
because you can hear it. Like Billie Jean. Billie Jean is in. What is Billie Jean in? I can't remember, but
I don't know.
I'll Google it and get back to you.
All right, so let's shift modes now and
There you go.
go to our main topic. So here we're here tonight to talk about ways to conquer, to battle writer's block, because we've all experienced getting stuck on a song. And I would be perfectly honest, for those of us that have listened to the podcast every week, as in Phil and myself, we kind of talk about this on virtually every episode of this show, because we talk about tools and we talk about things, knowledge you can acquire and use while you're songwriting, especially ways to get unstuck from certain situations. Whether it's retuning your guitar, whether it's trying a different instrument, whether it's just shifting something. It all boils down to just shifting your brain into a different space to explore something else. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We can just keep have the question open wide. I mean, maybe you guys can just talk a little bit about how you think about writer's block, or even if it's a consideration for you.
Yeah, Susan, what does writer's block mean to you, and have you experienced it?
So I think somebody said to me the other day that in a song doesn't ever stop, right? When there's a pause in a song, it's a rest. And I like the idea that when a writer is in that moment of not writing, it's just a rest. It's just a rest between pieces. And I think that, we should think about it that way instead of thinking of it as a paralyzing inability to create.
I love that.
There are a lot of people who are extremely prolific and then not prolific for a moment and then prolific again. And I think everyone has this fear when there are those dry periods that, oh my God, I'm never going to write another song again. Oh my God, whatever it was, it's gone. The magic is gone. Mm-hmm. And I really believe that the reason why songs don't get written sometimes is because you have a limited number of paths that you take to write a song. You usually use this path or this path or this path. And for some reason, those paths aren't available to you. And so you're not able to move forward. And I really, it's been kind of my goal in life to come up with as many different paths to writing a song as possible. Because I think if you know a lot of them, you can work your way around whatever blockade you have. Certainly there are some songs that maybe you're not ready to write them yet. Maybe you just they need to marinate in your brain before they're ready to see the light of day. And some songs just don't get written, and that's okay. I love the process. For me, a lot when I'm writing a song, I'll be like, I am going to write a song about this thing, whatever it is. And I start writing the song, and then I'm kind of like in the middle, distracted by this other idea that I've gotten. So I'll be like, no, don't get distracted. Write the idea. And was like, I keep getting distracted by that side project. And it turns out I end up writing the side song, not the main song. And sometimes, so the main song was the vehicle to get me to the side song, which was what I was meant to write. So I think that writer's block happens a lot of the time because I think people aren't ready. They're not ready to receive the muse. And so for me, I love coming up with different ways that you can be inspired so that when the muse comes a knocking, you're ready. I think that's the key, because sometimes you're just not in a writing mode. You're not thinking about songs. You're not thinking about songwriting. You're not listening for hooks. You're not kind of in the world in a musical way. And so I like to come up with a lot of different ways to kind of get you in the mood for making music. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I love that idea about it's just a rest.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
That's so good.
It's okay.
How about you, Phil?
Well, I think there's two different kinds of writer's blocks. I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and she's a writer, and she's been writing since she was I think 12, and has been an editor and a newspaper reporter, and short story novelist and all that stuff. And she says, there's the stuff where you just kind of like a momentary block where you can't write. And then there's other times when you don't want to write. And even though this is something that will be good for you and it's sort of what you're meant to do, but you sort of don't want to. And that's kind of an emotional an issue, which I think is harder to work out. But something that Susan had mentioned made me remember a fantastic book I read. I don't even know if it's still in print. It's called The Inner Game of Music. And it's about sort of the psychology of performing, and writing is a form of performing as well as, actually performing. And there's all these ways of kind of getting out of your head when you're trying to do these kinds of things. And one of the suggestions, just as for instance, was if you're about to go on stage and your hands are shaking and you're getting nervous, the one thing that you don't want to do is to try to stop your hands from shaking and try to not be nervous, because what's going to happen is you're going to tense up. And the more you tense up, the more nervous you'll be and the more your hands will shake. So what you do is you actually dive into the nervousness and you dive into the hand shaking and you just kind of let it go. And what'll happen is your hands will stop shaking and you won't be nervous. Because you're not, it's the idea of being like water. It's almost like a martial arts concept where you're just kind of going with the flow. You're acting like water. You're not trying to prevent something happening. You're just kind of going with it and going around it if you have to. And I think sometimes with writer's block, it's because you're trying too hard. And I think you need to kind of let it go. And I think that's one of the things I think I figured out. Another thing is, I think when you are a creator, if you're a visual creator or a writer or a songwriter or any kind of thing that has to produce art of some sort, there's different modes. There's the modes where you're actually making stuff, but then there's the mode where you're kind of building up your battery. And you have to build up your battery by experiencing more art. So if you're a songwriter and you've kind of run out of ideas, start trying to listen to lots of different kinds of music that you've never listened to, maybe that you don't even enjoy. So maybe you don't like rap music. Well, listen to a lot of rap music, because that's a whole bunch of stuff that you're not familiar with. And that's going to start to recharge your battery. There used to be this fantastic show on CBC called Gilmore's Albums, and he would just play the most bizarre assortments of 1920s opera, show tunes, modern pop, and it was just stuff that you would never normally hear. But it was a great way of kind of getting all these things into your brain in kind of this very sort of non-threatening kind of way. And you want to charge your battery, your creative battery, by listening to lots of different stuff. If you're a musician, go to see art, go to a museum and see visual art, because that'll help you understand things like contrast, and it just kind of gets that sort of battery charged, And see live music too is a great thing, because that can be very inspiring. One thing I used to do with the just finish off this thought here is when I was with the hookers, I'd see a band and they do this musical thing, and it might be like, having a drummer going dum 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 dum, and I thought, gee, we don't do a song like that. Maybe I should try doing something like that. And you start not trying to write a song, but just start playing with that idea. And that will lead to either a song that's based on that or a side song that you get from that idea, just charging your creative batteries.
Well, and Phil, I just want to say yes, 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 100% yes. And I would add on to that, read some good books, read some good poetry, watch some good television, go to good movies, ingest all of the art and media that, go to. I love there are lots of places where you can find creative ideas. And, we can be inspired not only by things we hear, but by things we see. Even like if you were going to experience a good meal, how would you write a song to describe the way you feel about a chocolate souffle? Like write a love song to a chocolate souffle. How does that sound? But I think also I read a book called On Writing, and it's all different authors, creative writers, not songwriters, talking about how they write, what their writing practice is. And the thing that all of them have in common is they do some form of daily writing. And I think, unfortunately, you have to have some sort of daily writing, whether it's, there's Morning Pages, which is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. That's like, a great book to follow. There's a book by Pat Pattison from Berklee who does Writing Better Lyrics, which is object writing. I do this weird kind of thing that is like, I'll show it to you, but you can't, your listeners can't see it. But so I have this bag. It's a bag full of random words, and I call it a pinch of words. And every day, or, I play games like literary games with myself, but I'll take a pinch of words out of the bag, and I have to see what the words are. And today is like victorious and strange. Those are the words that I have. And I set a timer. So it's a specific timer. And I just write on victorious and strange. I don't even know what that means. I don't know why I chose it. And that really helps me. Like if I write something down, I set a time limit. I do it every day. And because I do it every day, I don't have this pressure of like, oh my God, I've got to write the best thing I've ever written because this is the only time to write a song. Like I'm writing all the time. And so writing kind of becomes less of a big deal because I'm doing it so much.
Mm-hmm.
If it's terrible today, it'll be better tomorrow. It's like there's no, I think that writing every single day, I think practicing your instrument every single day is really important. And I think also, as you said, Phil, being inspired by other musicians is a great idea. For me, like how often do we really these days actually just listen to music? I think that's a forgotten art.
So true.
And so sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm just going to actually listen to this song. And invariably at the end, Phil, I'll be like, oh, I liked the way they sung that hook. Like they did that cool melody on that hook that kind of went up and then it went down again. What if I did a chorus that had that same thing? So I'm going to do my own version of whatever that song was. Or even like definitely like rhythm and feel. It's like, oh, cool. This is like an up tempo, angry song. Cool. I haven't written an up-tempo angry song in a while. Let's do that. And kind of using other songs as a template for your song, I think. And then if I could say one other thing, like what happens all the time, because I find it through every single person I've ever worked with, there's something called second verse hell, which means like you write verse 1, you write the chorus, and then you're like, well, I'm done. I have nothing to say. And that's like it's so common that I have a name for it, right? And a way to combat second verse hell, there are 2 ways to think about. First of all, think about like what material you have in your verse and what material you have in your chorus. Sometimes the chord structures are so much the same that they almost feel like the same section, which is why you don't kind of know where to go from it. Sometimes the material that's in your verse, which should be all descriptive, storytelling, etc., has a few lines in there that are kind of declarative, broad, big statements that probably should be in the chorus. And vice versa. Sometimes you'll have a chorus that's like chock-a-block full of furniture. It's got a lot of stuff in it. And maybe that material could be moved into a second verse and you just leave the chorus with the hook and you repeat the hook a bunch of times. So there are lots of ways to, like, for me, like that's one of the things that I find with a lot of writers is kind of second verse hell. And I remember I had one guy who he wrote this song, and he it was like there can be like a mismatch between your melody and your lyrics. Like it's almost, a friend of mine has this story that he believes that the muse is this beautiful woman, and she's like, "Here, Steve, I'm going to give you this beautiful lyric and this beautiful melody." And he's like, "But she's a jerk, because she's like, guess what? Steve's going to have to figure out that they don't belong together."
Mm-mm.
So sometimes a really effective way, as I said, I had this student who came in and his song was like, "Yay, I'm so glad we're back together." And the song was in minor. It was really sad. And I was like, "Are you happy that you're back together?" And he's like, oh yeah, sure I am. And he wasn't. Those twins needed to be separated, and the music belonged to something sad. The lyric belonged to something happier.
How about you, Neil?
Good old prosody again there. Yeah, I think what both of you guys are talking about is super interesting. I want to go back to what you were saying, Phil, about that notion of two types of block where you can't do it and you don't want to do it, because I think that gets back to what Susan was saying about the rest period and the kind of acceptance of that, and just saying, I don't feel like doing this right now, and that's perfectly okay. I'll do it later. But the danger, especially with those of us that have day jobs outside of songwriting, we don't write every day. We're not prolific as professional songwriters are, and and when we find the time to do it, we sort of try to engage with it. But sometimes you don't really feel like it because you don't really have the energy, and you distracted by other things and whatever. But but something Susan was saying about having access to all these paths, all these venues that you can go down, and having options to play around with, that enables you to sort of start almost anywhere and be able to progress that idea a little bit more. And I find too that something I've been thinking about a lot the last several years, probably since we started doing this podcast, really is the notion of, hey, that would make a nice song, that would make a good song, right? And sort of actively listening, but not just listening to other music, listening to the news, listening to something that happened to your friend, something that happened to a family member, and finding a cool way to express that, or an interesting way to work with that, and then taking a little jot note in your phone, and then once you've got it written down, then you can come back to it and, okay, what state of emotion was I in at that moment? Okay, let me see if I can work with that, and then try and develop a song. One of the things that I really was a big proponent of a few years ago, and recommending to people, was this keyword exercise, where you come up with an idea for a song, and then you're like, okay, what now? Like, I don't know where to go with this. And one of the things, I actually learned this from Pat Pattison's online course on Coursera, the keyword exercise, where you take your idea and then write down 4 or 5, 6 words that are very significant to that idea, right? And then you go on a rhyming dictionary like rhymezone.com or something like that, and you punch in each of those words, and you find a bunch of other words that are still related to your idea, because you got this notion of what the song is about, but you're not sure exactly how to proceed with it. So you got this general idea, so you pick out some other rhyming words that line up with those words. So now you've got sort of 5 columns of words that rhyme in each column, and they're all related to your idea, and you can start to piece together some kind of a lyric, and and that's almost inspirational in terms of you're getting another system to tell you some of these words that are related, and that and especially if they rhyme, hey, bonus, right? and you can, and that might spur some more ideas and be like, oh yeah, I know how to use that. Oh, that's an interesting intersection between those 2 ideas. Let's try and play with that. And then, and for myself, being a musician a lot longer than I've been a lyricist, I found, again, the last few years, if I do the hard part first, if I write the lyric first, that's always the struggle for me. If I do that, if I can muscle through a lyric, even if it's not perfect, and it's never perfect anyway, but even if it's kind of a lousy first draft, then I can hop onto the music easily and write some music behind it, and then go back to the lyric, refine, make sure it fits, make sure it works well together, and then you kind of go back and forth. But if I can muscle through a good chunk of the lyric, the first thing that I know I've conquered the hardest hurdle for myself. So the rest of it will be easy. Because if I do the other way, which is what I used to do years ago, I would always get blocked by writing these little musical tidbits on my piano. That's a nice little figure. Now what do I do? It's not a song yet. and then I would get stuck with, okay, what's this song about? What do I need to write about? What's the lyric behind this? What's the hook? Those sorts of things. I did have an instance once where I had this idea, and like you were saying, Susan, sometimes you have to let it simmer. So I was thinking about it, but I needed a metaphor, and I didn't know what the metaphor was going to be, and I actually woke up in the middle of the night once. And all of a sudden the idea came to me. It was like what the metaphor was going to be. The idea was like this notion that I read from a Malcolm Gladwell book about how your upbringing and sort of past experiences really strongly inform, what the person you are today, and all those sorts of things, right? All those kind of relationships from past to present. The metaphor I came up with was echoes, because everything you do today is an echo of what came in the past. It's echoes of this, echoes of that, echoes of the teachers I had, echoes of the bullying I experienced, echoes of the family upbringing I had, families, all those sorts of things, right? And then once I had that, then the thing kind of rolled out. But you're right, I did have to just leave it alone for a little bit and just simmer the idea. And then I guess I got lucky in that sense of it. The metaphor kind of stumbled upon me for our latest songwriting challenge, because we had a deadline to get the songwriting challenge done. I actually started Googling, my keywords and reading articles about this topic, about mental health, and actually Googled it, metaphors for mental health, whatever, and then found some other keywords, got those assembled in there, and then I could build some sort of lyric. And then after that, the music part's easy for me anyway. So there's lots of
I just want to that's so great. I love what you said. And also I would suggest that when you're compiling your list of words, that you also think about, if you were going to make a music video about the idea behind the song, what would it look like? Because I think, people really respond to songs that have things in them that they can see and they can imagine. So when you're at that beginning stage, when you're collecting words, I also have the students, I ask people to well, what does your music video look like? Where is the song taking place? In a city, in the country, in a field, on a mountain, on the ocean? That will also help inform and give you some cool words to look up rhymes for.
And more visual language.
And then the second thing that I loved that you said was the fact that you just muscle it out, which sometimes it is. I think of it sometimes like I'm in a jungle and I have to get to a gorilla that's in the jungle, and I have a pocket knife, and I have to sometimes it feels like I have to get, through a lot of bamboo to get to the gorilla. But the key is to write stuff down to start. Because I think a lot of people, when they start writing songs, immediately, the judge and the jury are all there saying, no, that's not good. No, stop. That's terrible. I call it like the Velveeta effect, because they'll be they're writing, oh, this is so cheesy. Oh, it's terrible. And the fact is that you've just got to throw it out there, because once you do that, then you have something to edit. But if you don't ever try it, if you don't ever get it onto paper or into your journal or whatever, into your phone, you won't have anything to edit. You don't have anything to work with. So sometimes the key is just ignore the jury, ignore the judge, write it out, make it bad. It doesn't matter. You can always edit it.
Yeah, you can even say to yourself, I'm going to write the worst song that I can, and it's going to be crap, and then you can work off of that.
Well, because when what I do, for my for money during the day is advertising and marketing. So I have to write stuff, and we have like real deadlines. It's not like, oh, this isn't working. I have to deliver something by 2. And some days, you're right on top of it and you got a great idea. And other times there's nothing in the tank, but I still have to deliver something by 2, and it still has to be good enough. And I don't recommend that for everybody, but what happens is you start putting down really dumb stuff. And sometimes, like, I can't even string like a sentence together, but you start putting stuff together and editing it, and then you come up with an idea. And just that process of polishing it and moving it around suddenly gets to be good. And then you deliver and it's done and everyone loves it. So I think that's it. And one thing I was thinking is there's different phases in a creator's existence. And there's different periods. And, there's going to be periods where you're going to be really prolific and you're writing lots of stuff. And then there's going to be another period where it's all about learning. And you're not going to write anything, but you're going to learn. And that might be things like listening to this podcast, reading books on it, and this is especially true if you're in a band, but you've always played original music. In some ways, you're robbing yourself, because there's no better way to learn about songs than playing someone else's song. So find your very favorite song, the song that you love, and understand that after you go through this exercise, you will not love it in the same way. But you will spend and take a Saturday. Like this is like a multi-hour kind of thing. And you're not writing anything, but what you're doing is you're learning it. So take your song and a pair of headphones and figure out the chords. Write out all the chords, write out all the words, write out where the chords are, and then slowly go through the melody and figure out, okay, does this song start on a 3rd or a 5th or a flat 7th or a 6th, and then see how that melody walks through those chords. And this is going to be really, really slow, and you're going to go through this song hundreds and hundreds of times. But by doing that, you're going to understand how that song was actually constructed and how they put stuff together. And you'll go, well, what is that hook that they do? And you go, oh, well, that hook is really cool. That's a flat 7. And you might go, wow, that's really hard. Like I love Devo. And I realized that by doing this with some Devo songs is that Mark Mothersbaugh loves the flat 7. He's always singing like usually 2 octaves above the bass with a flat 7th, which is really hard to actually sing because most people go to the root. But it's that kind of insight that will help you understand sort of how something is put together. And once you learn more stuff, then you'll be more open to creating stuff. So it's okay to not actually be in a writing mode. Sometimes you're just in a sowing seeds mode,
Mm.
Exactly. And so it's so cool that you said sowing seeds, because that's calling them song seeds. That's what we call them. So it's like, and you can collect different kinds of song seeds. So something can be a lyric idea, right? An actual thing. And I also want to say, like, pre-COVID and now hopefully post-COVID, like, where do you get song ideas, right? People talk to you. They'll say an expression that suddenly resonates with you. Collect that in your phone. Go to a mall and sit in the food court and eavesdrop and listen to other people's conversations with a mask on, hopefully. Yes. And, and collect like verbal song seeds. And then there are melodic song seeds. So you hear a wonderful song, or you analyze a song and you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to do that. The chorus is in this range and the verse is in this range and the chorus is actually a full octave up higher. Oh, that's a cool sound. I'm going to do that. So you make a note of that. And then there are chordal song seeds. So it's like a chord progression that you can really like. And so, say you can take someone's chord progression in another song and you can change up what the chords are, but you can also like change when the chords happen. right? You can make if it starts on the 4, and in the original song it goes 4 5 1 1 1 1 1 4 5 1 1 1. Well, what if you stayed on the 4 for 2 full measures, and then you went to the 1 instead, and then the 5? And that's a chordal song seed. And then there is a rhythmic song seed if you like a particular rhythm that you can sing into your phone, or if you have a drum track. I love having people write to a drum track, because a lot of sad musicians who are writing really sad songs sometimes need to increase the BPM a little bit more, and writing to a drum track can really inspire you to do that. And then the last one is the one that Neil was talking about, where it's a metaphorical song seed. It's like an idea. Like, I want to write about, autumn. And so I don't know what I'm going to write about, but I feel like the theme of autumn is going to be the kind of template of this song. So, keeping these song seeds and keeping track of them, I think, is really important. I know a lot of artists who are they're like, I got a great song idea and it's written on a napkin. Then I'm like, no, you have to write it on something that, so I like to keep track of my song seeds and my song ideas on my phone and also on my computer. And then last but not least, let's not forget also the beauty of co-writing to help people get beyond writer's block. Because sometimes you just need somebody else's influence to kind of push you along. And also to feel like a little validation, because you can bring an idea in there, and hopefully if they're a good co-writer, they'll be like, awesome. And you're like, awesome, they like my idea. Yay, I'm good. And then you can go forward and write together. So
it's like what they say. I don't know anything about drama or improvisation, but I've heard about improvisation is that you don't collaborate with you because that's improv is a collaboration. You're collaborating with another actor, right? You never say, you never hear someone's idea and say, but XXX. You say, and.
Yeah.
I'm going to add to this. We're going to build upon this, as opposed to that's not working. We need to go this way. No, let's try and work with what we have. The interesting thing about everything that we're saying here is that to get past a block, what you're essentially doing is you're focusing your attention, right? Because there's nothing scarier than facing a blank page and being like, okay, today I'm going to write a song. That is not going to get you anywhere. You need to sit down and say, I'm going to write a song about X. I'm going to write a song with that melody I heard last week on that cool song that really resonated with me. I'm going to write a song about, or with, essentially, is what we've been talking about for the last 3 years, is songwriting challenges. You're essentially giving yourself a challenge to say, I heard something interesting, or I saw something interesting, and now I'm going to write a song based on that, right? And that allows your vision to be much more focused, and that for sure is what's going to get you at least past the first parts. And then if you continue with that focus, it can actually drive you through the entire. If you got something really compelling that you're hinging on, then that could essentially drive the creative process right through your entire song. But that's essentially what we're doing here, is we're finding these little ways, these little pathways to focus your attention and not just say, I'm going to write a song about what.
Well, and I would even make that assignment even smaller, because I think we want to make it so that it's successful. So instead of writing a song about, let's just say you're going to sit down and write a chorus. Right. Mm-hmm. So just or even we're going to sit down and come up with 5 song titles, and not even develop them, just come up with 5 song titles. And then the person who is feeling a little bit stuck is like, well, cool, I can do that, and I think breaking it down into small kind of manageable things makes it not so daunting. Like, oh my God, I have to write a whole song. Oh my God, Right?
Also, you don't have to. Yeah. Not every song that you're going to write is going to be fantastic. So, sometimes if you can't write anything, write a stupid song about your feet. Even if it's just feet, 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 feet. If that's your whole song, that's okay. And that's I think when people are trying to be perfect all the time, just think I'm just gonna experiment with this dumb chord thing. And if nothing comes with it, that's okay. It doesn't have to be great. I mean, because even professional songwriters, when they get together and sometimes they're working, sometimes stuff doesn't come through. And sometimes the stuff that comes through isn't that good. That's okay. That's the way art is. And also, don't feel bad about borrowing stuff from other people. Picasso was a pretty standard painter until he actually saw an exhibition on African masks. And then he brought those forms into his art. And if you look at the faces of his women, they all look like African masks because he brought that aspect into his art. And that's what I'm saying. If you don't listen to hip hop, listen to some hip hop. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to bring all that stuff in it, but you might bring some of that kind of fantastic rhythmical phrasing that they have, or maybe the way they handle their bass. So just don't feel bad about borrowing stuff from other art or other musicians and bringing them in and going, well, maybe this works, because someone might say, oh, that just sounds like Kraftwerk, but there's lots of people out there who've never heard of Kraftwerk before. And to them, it'll be, wow, that's really new.
Well, yeah. And I find that with my songwriting, I'll be borrowing from a lot of different things that I don't even realize until afterwards. At one point, I was doing a co-write with two people, and one was a piano player and one was this amazing, amazing singer. And they hadn't written a song before, and I was the one who was coming in with the song ideas. And I had been reading a short story, and the short story said something. It was about, I don't know, something. There was some line about like, you weren't where you promised you'd be. And I wrote that down. I thought that was really interesting. And then I went to an art exhibit, and they had in the gift shop, they had a beautiful painting on a book of Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth, which is that famous painting of the girl reaching towards the house in the back. She's wearing a pink dress. It's very like Midwestern. And then I go to this co-write, and the woman that I'm writing with, the singer, had just lost her father and just lost her mother, and she was getting married. And she was so upset that her parents weren't going to be where they promised they would be when she was getting married. And we used the visual of Christina's World, that line, and, this person's story to write the song. And it was really cool because it was like, oh, I'm kind of pulling from here and I'm pulling from here. And, I agree with you, Phil, that like, you'd be amazed by what you can be inspired by in the world, and how you can pick in a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Like one of the coolest assignments, sometimes I'll tell people, chord progression wise, take a chord progression from one song, a verse of one song, and a chord progression from a chorus from a different song, and put them together and see what happens. And that can be like a really cool exercise to try. So
one thing I've learned from this conversation is I never write a song about anything. I come up with like the music and the idea and the melody, and then kind of go la 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 la, and then figure out what the words are from there. So as opposed to like, oh, I'm going to write a song about mental health or something like that. It's an interesting different way people work, but it's
and Peter Gabriel, you are like Peter Gabriel. If anybody knows Peter Gabriel, and he's not too old for your audience now, but
it's very depressing.
Peter Gabriel came out with an album called So, which was amazing. And he actually published, it's called So DNA, and you can find it on YouTube and everywhere, and you'll hear how a song emerges. And he is like you, Phil. He writes like he top lines is what it's called, where you build the track and then you just sing nonsense vowels over it. And you can hear him like, I'm falling down, red rain is falling down. And you're like, oh, there's the song. And, so that's totally a way to do it. And so what's cool about that kind of songwriting is that you're almost letting the vowels
Yes.
tell you what the song is about. And, if you listen to, I like to play a band called Sigur Rós from Iceland.
Oh, those are awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So they do not have any language. They just use vowel sounds and consonants and their songs. But you hear their songs and you're like, this one is about birds. Like, there are no words in it, but the music and the vowel sounds feel like birds flying or sunrise or something like that. So using vowel sounds as kind of your guide into a song is a wonderful way to write music. And you usually end up with a really good, like the song and the melody and the lyric are usually really beautifully matched because you've been singing it the whole time. From like the get-go, you're singing it. So it's going to feel really good.
Yeah, I've never written lyrics down and then, which is, I should force myself to it because it's something I don't do. I know Blair Packham, that's how he usually, he writes down, the song down and then does the music, and it's...
Yeah. And for myself, like that's the thing that switched for me probably about 6 or 7 years ago, is that I was like you, Phil. I always wrote music and even a full melody and then try to jam some lyrics on top of it. But again, I find if I work the other way around, and it doesn't always work that way. Of course, sometimes I will, come up with a little piano ditty, and then, but the one thing I will do is I will not finish the music. I'll always go to, what is this song about? And it's one of the first things you learn on Pat Patterson's course too, is he always like, what is the song about? It's not a lyric, it's not the title, but what, in a nutshell, in one sentence, what's your idea
right
behind the song?
Because that can lead to so many choices that you make, right? It can lead, it can lead to choices like, what rhymes do you use, or what rhymes don't you use, or do you not use any rhymes in certain sections to create a sense of tension or stress? Or what is the line lengths? Like, do you want it to feel really languid and open, so long lines, or do you want it to feel really short and stuttery, and then therefore short lines? So if you know kind of what your song is about, that can dictate the feel of the music and the kind of lyric structure in a way that I think is really cool. So
yeah, absolutely. There's so many choices out there and so many avenues you can take. But again, it's very true. We want, this is what we look to, resources like this podcast and our meetup and other things like the books you mentioned, Susan. It's all tools in your toolbox, and the more tools you have, the easier. Like, I don't even think about writer's block anymore. It's just, I need to write a song, I just write a song. Because I have the tools to be able to navigate my way through it, and I can come up with something. It may not be great,
but do it every day. Do it every day.
I know.
The more you do it, the easier it'll be.
We have been talking about it weekly for like 9 years now, so that should count for something.
That's count for something. We know the how to. We just don't do it ourselves.
That's true. That's too much work.
Too much work. Okay, speaking of too much work, that's about all the time we have on the show tonight. This has been Song Talk Radio. Special thank you, Susan Cattaneo.
Thank you,
Susan.
Thank you for having me. I love talking to you guys.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. And where can our listeners find more about you, Susan?
Find me on, I'm everywhere, susancattaneo.com. Susan on Bandcamp, Susan on Facebook. I'm everywhere. I'm just Susan Music.
Nice.
Find me that way.
Perfect. And we want to hear from you, our listeners. So please send us your comments, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Song Talk Radio, or send us an email, feedback@songtalk.ca. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel for live performance videos and full episodes. Subscribe today to the Song Talk Radio podcast on your favorite podcast provider, and our free newsletter at songtalk.ca. You can find links to all the products, books, and web services we mentioned on the show on our resources page on our website. And wherever you are in the world, please join us online via Zoom at our next monthly Song Talk meetup. It's free to join on meetup.com and free to attend the meetup, bring a song and a lyric sheet, and get constructive feedback from other songwriters. Stop by songtalk.ca for the link. You can follow me at neilmodi.com. You can follow Phil
at philemery.ca.
And Susan, what's your favorite social media channel of choice?
Instagram. Susan C.
Instagrammer is
Music.
Susan Music.
Yeah, Susan Cattaneo. You can find me there.
Susan Cattaneo, perfect. And thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to stop by the website, songtalk.ca, to browse past shows, find out how you can be a guest. Thank you, everyone, and keep on writing.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.